Hello everyone, welcome back. This is David Bianco. So today I'm going to be catching up on a few items that have come through in the comments and questions in recent videos, and I intend here not to have any confrontation or drama, but some clarification and responses. One of the items that has come up often has been the Mobile Fidelity lawsuit, the MOFI lawsuit, and why it only is structured so that people in the United States are going to get resolution on that. And it was pointed out to me quite simply that the lawsuits were filed here in the U.S., and of course that's the boundary of jurisdiction. That means that if there were lawsuits that were filed in the EU, let's say, against Mobile Fidelity, then they could look for some restitution for those people who had bought them. But no one, I assume, has brought a case against MOFI from those other areas where purchases were made. So until that happens, there really is no way to get restitution through the existing lawsuits. Doing reviews and doing shootouts, I wanted to talk about this a bit because I've gotten some interesting feedback in my last recent ones on the cars and Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. And, one of the things that came up was someone saying, well, I thought my version of fill in the blank, in this case it was a MOFI, sounded pretty darn good. And I will tell you that it is really end up being human nature that when you listen to something, sometimes it can really sound fine the way it is. But it's when you do these comparisons that you recognize that there are some gaps. And that really is where it's at. So it's not to say that you can't be satisfied with something. These reviews are in place to try to determine between certain pressings which one might yield the most satisfying sound. Now, I have found that there is no rule. In other words, not all MOFIs are bad. Not all MOFIs are good. Some of the DSDs sound great. Some of the DSDs don't. Some of the all analogs sound great. Some of the all analogs don't. So it always comes down to a listening test. And I want to make clear, and this was asked of me by Nathan Goss, who's a guy that I was on with Steve Westman last week on Steve's channel for a roundtable, how I listened to my music, because he recognized that he and I had always had similar types of findings. And he basically asked, so do you add any tonal change to your system at all when listening to records? And I don't. I don't boost the bass. I don't boost the treble. I don't have an equalizer in line with it at all. I play it flat from the factory, as I call it. And the real transducer in that is the cartridge, of course, because the cartridge is going to have a certain personality to it, and that is an influencer, of course. Your speakers are an influencer, as of course, if you use headphones, your headphone reproduction is as well. But when it comes to the receiver, it comes to the amplification, I don't put any bias in that. Now, there may be some people who, when they listen to something, they naturally do have that type of EQ put on because it is enjoyable to them, or it's a compensation for the room they're in, or whatever it might be, a compensation for the speakers. I don't know. So are all things equal? Well, not always, but in my reviews, across my reviews, they are the same in that I don't use any emphasis or de-emphasis. I play it straight as it comes. And for that reason, there could be times where someone thinks a certain release, let's say the MOFI Cars release, sounded good to them on their system. And maybe it did. And maybe it does because they don't listen to any other version. And again, a lot of these things standing alone sound decent. It's again where you get the difference in there. So I wanted to clarify that process and also say that this is very subjective, obviously. But I will say that so far, from what I have seen, just about everybody pretty well agrees with the winners, losers, the rankings of the reviews that I do. I did have someone come up and say now today that they received the Rhino Cars release and the John Coltrane, and they found those vinyl surfaces to be noisy. I did not have that experience with the Cars, and looking at some other reviews and some responses to my reviews, if any comment was made about the vinyl at all, it was that it wasn't noisy. So maybe this person got some bad pressings. I don't know. It's unfortunate it happens. My suggestion was to return them and get a replacement and see, because again, I've not seen anybody have that issue. Now, the packaging of it, in terms of the packing when it gets shipped, I have seen some issues with that. Now, mine was sent, I got 2 of the Cars releases, and it was sent in this particular type of LP packaging, and it was fine. Now, it had no corner protectors, so if it had fallen or hit a corner, it could have been dinged. In my case, it wasn't. But is this packaging sufficient? I would say it's not, because the corners are not protected. And I think that's a shortcoming. But apparently the packaging for some, in terms of what they received, was even worse. So as we talked about on Steve's show on Friday, the roundtable and information from Rhino is they're aware of it, they're checking into it, and trying to resolve that very problem. So that's really the way it should be handled. And again, if you have any issues with the pressing from anybody, let the person know who you bought it from and try to work out an agreeable solution to it. You know, one of the things about the series of high fidelity from Rhino is, no, it does not use superior vinyl compound. It doesn't use like a super vinyl like MOFI does on some of their $60 releases. So they never claimed that that was the case. It's pretty much standard vinyl, and it's pressed at Optimal in Germany. And one of the commenters basically said, gee, you know, that's not necessarily a place where you might have higher end things pressed. You might do it at Palace in Germany, or in the US at RTI, or at QRP in Salinas, Kansas. And I would agree with that sentiment. When I first saw that the series from Rhino was being pressed at Optimal in Germany, I kind of thought, uh-oh, I don't know. Now, Optimal has been improving over the years, but they did have quality issues, and I was just a little bit concerned, were they to a point of being good enough for something considered a high fidelity series? Well, again, in my experience with the Cars, the vinyl was fine. It wasn't noisy for me, and you know, mine was stamped 4,006 out of 5,000. This other person's was under 1,000. And again, that's a stamping on the actual exterior jacket. So, you know, that really has nothing to do with the record sequence of what has gone inside of that. So who knows whether ours were pressed near in the same lot, use the same stamper? Who knows? We don't know. But we do know, apparently, there is this instance of a noisy vinyl situation, and but the rest, as I said, didn't have it. So Optimal, in my opinion, at least for this pressing, from my experience, was fine. But it was, I agree, a choice that I was a little bit hesitant about when I first saw it. And, you know, that's only based on experience. Again, Palace to me is kind of like the cream of the crop. Coming out of Germany, I pretty much have never had any issue with anything that has come from Palace. One of the other topics that did come up is that maybe because of what I had said related to the Cars, and my impression, of course, in an earlier video saying that I didn't care for the pressing of that album by MOFI, you know, that I was bashing MOFI. But I have given solid positive reviews towards MOFI products, which use DSD. I've done those kind of positive reviews after I knew it was DSD. So they're really is no bias in my mind. At least I'm just calling it as I see it, or in this case of as I hear it, toward these pressings. There's a lot of them with the DSD that sound very, very good, and I wouldn't trade that version for anything. So I try to just play it with the way I hear it and give you my honest impression on that. I don't really have an agenda. Doesn't change the fact that MOFI did what it did, and I found that egregious. It might influence what I buy from MOFI. So you got to understand, I buy everything that I review. And so when I get people who say, well, why didn't you compare it to this or that or the other? It's usually because I don't have it. And I only can spend so much on this hobby. Now, as I mentioned in an earlier video, some gracious folks have sent me a few records to compare things to. And when that happens, it helps everybody get a wider representation of what's out there. And I really do appreciate that. So, what I get out of this is enjoyment, and I get fulfillment. And if I can help someone either make a good decision or avoid a bad decision, that's really what I'm doing this for. And it's no joy to me to sit there and say I paid $40 or $60 or $125 and then turn around and tell you I don't think it's that great. I mean, I might have trouble selling it because of my own review. So it is what it is. It's always that way. It's subjective. It's my equipment. It's my ears. But I do appreciate all the comments. Generally very positive and very encouraging, which is what I really appreciate. And I have a video coming on, yes, fragile.
Fragile. It must be Italian.
Well, I think that says fragile, honey.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of my favorite albums. And I've been giving it a listen, and I'll be ready in the next few days to release that. So stay tuned. As always, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed, if you'd click on that bell below, I'd appreciate it. And a thumbs up is always appreciated. Comments, again, are always welcome. And they're the very reason that I was able to provide some input here on what the feedback has been in the past few weeks. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on our next Safe and Sound Texas audio excursion. Take care, everybody.